Have you ever sat in silence and thought, why do I feel so lost, when nothing seems wrong on the outside? You have a job, maybe a family, you've built things, lived decades, and yet there's this quiet ache, a fog inside. You wonder if it's just aging, or weakness, or maybe you're just tired. But Gabor Maté, a physician who spent years listening to the wounds behind addiction, stress, and chronic illness, would tell you something different. You are not broken, you are hurt, and there's a world of difference between the two. In this video, we'll explore the real reason why you feel lost. Not the superficial answers, not the "just be positive" slogans, but the deep, often invisible emotional wounds that shape our entire adult life. By the end, you may not have all the answers, but you'll finally begin asking the right questions. And that alone changes everything. It rarely happens all at once. You don't just wake up one day and say, "I've lost myself." It's more subtle than that. It begins in small hesitations, in sighs you can't explain, in the way joy slowly fades from familiar places. Sometimes, you're surrounded by people, yet feel completely alone. You're achieving, producing, performing, but inside, there's a strange emptiness, a disconnection from who you used to be, or maybe who you've never truly known. This silent collapse is one of the most common, yet most misunderstood, human experiences. Especially in midlife, a phase society glorifies for stability, but often forgets is ripe with inner rupture. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Feeling lost doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means something real in you is asking to be seen. Gabor Maté says, "We are wounded in relationship, and we are healed in relationship." But what happens when our early relationships taught us to ignore our own needs in order to be loved? That's when the confusion begins. When you've spent your life playing roles, the caregiver, the achiever, the strong one, it's easy to lose sight of who you actually are. You become so good at adapting that you slowly disappear behind the adaptation. And one day, you sit quietly with yourself and realize, I don't even know what I want anymore. This is not failure. This is the invitation. The feeling of being lost is not the end of your story. It's the first honest page. There's a quiet shame that often follows the feeling of being lost. A voice inside whispers, "You should be over this by now. You have no reason to feel this way. Other people have it worse." We dismiss our own pain because we've been taught to minimize it. But as Gabor Maté reminds us, what we call dysfunction is often just unhealed pain trying to be heard. You may think you're just too sensitive, or not strong enough. But sensitivity is not a flaw. It's a sign of depth, of having felt things too deeply, too early, without anyone to help make sense of it. When you were young, if your pain wasn't seen, or your emotions were too big for those around you, you learned to hide them, to adapt, to survive. But here's the truth. The body keeps the score. The mind forgets, but the heart stores. And over time, that stored pain leaks into your relationships, your work, your self-worth, until one day it feels like everything is off, and you don't know why. This isn't weakness. This is a system built to survive what you never had the chance to process. The person who shows up to help others but can't ask for help? The overachiever who never feels enough? The one who keeps peace at all costs but feels invisible. These are not random traits. They are emotional strategies, born from wounds. Gabor Maté says, "We develop personalities not in freedom, but in reaction to our environment. So if you felt broken, lost, or deeply exhausted, stop asking, 'What's wrong with me?' Instead, ask, Where did I stop feeling safe to be myself? That's where the healing begins. You may think your anxiety is just stress, your fatigue is just aging, your back pain is just posture. But what if your body is speaking the words your soul has silenced? Gabor Maté spent years working with patients who had chronic illness, addiction, depression, and he noticed something striking. Their emotional histories were woven into their physical symptoms. The body doesn't lie. It can't. When you repress your emotions, your body expresses them for you. It shows up in migraines, digestive issues, insomnia. It shows up in compulsions, endless scrolling, binge eating, overworking, anything to distract from the ache inside. We've learned to treat the symptom, not the story. You feel anxious, so you take a pill. You feel tired, so you drink more coffee. You feel disconnected, so you stay busy. But these are signals, not enemies. The body is not betraying you. It's trying to protect you. Maté says, illness is not a random misfortune, but a meaningful message. When you slow down and truly listen, your body might be saying, I'm tired of pretending. I need rest, not productivity. I want to be loved as I am, not as I perform. This doesn't mean you caused your illness or pain. It means your body is asking for your truth. That's a powerful shift. From fighting your symptoms to honoring your story. Imagine what might change if instead of numbing, you began to feel. If, instead of judging your pain, you held it with compassion. The body remembers what the mind can't bear, but when the heart is finally allowed to speak, the healing can begin. And that changes everything. When most people hear the word trauma, they think of violence, war, or catastrophe. But Gabor Maté offers a radically different definition, one that explains why so many of us walk around wounded yet unaware. Trauma is not what happens to you, he says, but what happens inside you as a result of what happened. It's not just the event. It's the emotional disconnection it caused, the parts of yourself you had to suppress just to keep going. Maybe you were never hit. Maybe no one screamed. But what if no one noticed when you were afraid? What if no one held you when you cried? What if you had to become the responsible one at an age when you needed to be held? That, too, is trauma. It's the wound of emotional abandonment, not always by malicious parents, but often by caregivers who were themselves overwhelmed, absent, or emotionally shut down. And when a child's emotional world isn't mirrored back to them, something essential fractures. They learn not to trust their own feelings. They learn to perform instead of feel. They survive, but disconnect. Trauma doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, "Don't bother anyone with your needs. Keep smiling, even when you're dying inside. Be useful, or you won't be loved." These beliefs settle deep into your nervous system. They shape your sense of worth, your boundaries, your relationships, and they echo through adulthood, in the way you work, parent, love, or hide. The beauty of this insight. If trauma is what happened inside you, then healing is also what can happen inside you, when you're finally safe enough to feel what you once couldn't. Not to relive the pain, but to reclaim the parts of you it buried. You weren't born disconnected. You were born whole, alive, honest, emotional, needing, and then, slowly, you adapted. Not because you were weak, but because you were intelligent. You sensed what was safe, what was accepted, what made you lovable. If crying made others uncomfortable, you stopped crying. If anger led to punishment, you smiled instead. If being quiet kept the peace, you learned to disappear. In the words of Gabor Maté, children don't get traumatized because they are hurt. They get traumatized because they are alone with their hurt. So you learn to leave yourself, to stay connected to others. That's the paradox. To survive emotionally, you had to abandon your authenticity. And what happens when you grow up with this pattern? You continue betraying yourself for connection. You say yes when you mean no. You stay into places that drain you. You silence your truth to avoid conflict. You give and forget how to receive. Self-abandonment becomes automatic. You don't even notice it until the exhaustion sets in, until you wake up in a life that looks full on the outside and feels empty inside. And here's the cruel twist. You may blame yourself for that emptiness, when in truth, it began long ago, in moments where you had to choose between being loved and being real. But now, as an adult, you have a new choice: to return to yourself, to stop asking, "How do I please others?" and start asking, "What does my soul need right now?" The world may not applaud your truth, but your heart will recognize it. And for the first time in a long time, you'll feel home. From the outside, you might look perfectly functional. You're the reliable one, the productive one, the one who has it together. But inside, you're exhausted, disconnected, maybe even resentful, though you barely allow yourself to feel it. Here's the truth few talk about. What helped you survive back then may be hurting you now. When we adapt to childhood emotional environments that lacked safety or attunement, we often develop traits that look admirable, but are rooted in fear. Hyper-independence isn't strength, it's protection. Perfectionism isn't excellence, it's a defense against shame. People-pleasing isn't kindness, it's a strategy to avoid rejection. These are not conscious choices. They are nervous system responses, ways we learned to earn love, not receive it freely. And while these adaptations may have helped you cope in childhood, they can make you sick in adulthood. Not always in obvious ways. Sometimes through anxiety, burnout, immune disorders. Sometimes through numbness, where you can't even remember what joy feels like. Maté puts it clearly: the disease is not the enemy. The disease is the expression of the life you've lived. That can sound harsh, but it's actually freeing. Because if illness, addiction, or emotional struggle are not random, but meaningful responses to our disconnection, then healing becomes possible. Not by fixing yourself, but by unlearning who you had to become, to be accepted. You're not here to be useful. You're here to be you. The healing begins not in doing more, but in finally allowing yourself to be real. You may be 40, 50, 60 years old, but somewhere inside you, a younger version of yourself is still waiting to be seen. This child doesn't want revenge. They don't need someone to blame. They want to be held, heard, valued. We often try to get over our childhood, but the truth is, we carry our unmet needs with us until they are finally met, not by our parents, but by us. This is not about wallowing in the past. It's about realizing that the pain you feel today may not belong to the present moment, but to a child who didn't get what they needed when it mattered most. That child might still be asking, "Is it safe to speak? Am I too much? Am I lovable without performing?" And here's the most heartbreaking part. When no one answers those questions, we begin to answer them ourselves, usually in ways that hurt. We say, "I guess I am too much. I should stay quiet. I'm only lovable when I achieve." This internal dialogue becomes our operating system. But it doesn't have to stay that way. Gabor Maté invites us to turn toward that child, not to judge them, but to listen. You can say now what no one said back then. You matter. Your feelings are valid. You don't have to earn love. Reparenting yourself isn't a trend. It's a necessity. You don't need to be perfect at it. You just need to be present. Every time you choose compassion over criticism, stillness over productivity, honesty over performance, you're telling your inner child, I won't leave you again. And that, for many of us, is where the real healing begins. You've spent years being hard on yourself, criticizing every weakness, hiding every vulnerability, believing that healing meant fixing what was wrong with you. But what if the path back to yourself doesn't begin with control, but with compassion? Most of us don't know how to offer it to ourselves. We know how to push, to punish, to perform. But compassion, that feels foreign, even dangerous. Gabor Maté says, the essence of trauma is disconnection from the self, and the essence of healing is reconnection with it. And you cannot reconnect with something you still judge. Self-compassion is not weakness. It's not self-pity. It's strength, the kind that says, I see how hard this has been for you. You didn't deserve what happened. You're still worthy, even in your mess. It doesn't mean you excuse harmful behavior. It means you understand where it came from. And finally, stop adding more pain to an already wounded heart. For many, this shift feels impossible. We ask, how can I love myself when I feel so broken? But the truth is, healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before you had to adapt to survive. Start there, with tenderness, with curiosity. Ask yourself, what would I say to a child feeling this way? Can I offer myself the same kindness? Every act of self-compassion rewires your nervous system. It tells your brain, I am safe now. It tells your soul, I haven't given up on you. And slowly, gently, a new kind of strength begins to rise. Not the kind that comes from pretending, but the kind that comes from finally being honest. Perfection is a lie we were sold early. Be good and they'll love you. Get it right and you'll be safe. Don't make mistakes and you won't be left. But no one tells you that the pursuit of perfection leads to chronic self-rejection. You become afraid of being seen, not because there's something wrong with you, but because you've learned that your real self isn't enough. So you perform. You edit your truth. You keep people at a distance. And inside, you wait for someone to finally see the real you and stay. But what if that someone is you? Gabor Maté reminds us, you are not here to meet others' expectations. You are here to be yourself. You don't have to be fully healed to start loving yourself. You don't need to have it all figured out to be worthy of peace. Wholeness isn't about being flawless. It's about reclaiming the parts of you that were left behind. The sensitive one, the angry one, the messy one, the one who still believes in magic. These parts don't make you weak. They make you human. Healing isn't linear. Some days you'll feel light. Others you'll fall back into old stories. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you're on the path. So let go of the myth that you have to arrive somewhere. Let go of the need to prove, fix, earn. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to cry. You're allowed to start again, as many times as it takes. Wholeness isn't something you find out there. It's what returns to you when you stop running from yourself. You don't have to be perfect to be whole. You just have to be present. Healing is not a destination. It's not a checklist. It's a return to the parts of yourself you were forced to leave behind. It begins quietly, not in breakthroughs, but in moments. When you say no without guilt, when you rest without justification, when you cry and don't apologize for it. These are not small things. They are revolutionary, because they signal a shift from self-abandonment to self-honoring, from performing life to living it. According to Gabor Maté, healing doesn't happen in isolation. We were wounded in disconnection. We heal in connection. That means finding people who see you, not just your mask, but your truth. It means building relationships that honor your needs, not punish them. It means becoming that safe presence for yourself, so your nervous system can finally exhale. And above all, it means forgiving yourself. Not for being wounded, but for believing you had to hide that wound to be loved. You don't have to wait for the perfect time. You don't need all the answers. You just need the willingness to begin again, with tenderness. Healing is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your reunion with your body, your truth, your life. And perhaps with a version of yourself who's been waiting patiently all along, whispering, "Welcome home."